By the human calendar, the date was July 6, 1945, 5:30 in Alamogordo, New Mexico. That was the exact date and time we noticed them on that dull blue speck they called Earth. They were a divided people, fighting each other across their entire planet. To be quite honest, we assumed they would destroy themselves after they used two of the devices against an island nation called Japan. We figured that in a few short years, they would have irradiated their world, and all we would need to do was a short cleanup of their radioactive mess, and report we had found a perfect world for colonization. Not even a footnote in galactic history would remain. But they didn't. In fact, their governments developed newer and more powerful weapons than the ones employed, testing them in remote locations, while their people went on about their day as if nothing had changed. There were warnings that it might happen, but they continued testing while using rudimentary conventional weapons in their continuing wars. Then we noticed that they were developing newer conventional weapons as well. Damn. 40 of their years later, a lot had changed in their advancement, and they had yet to eradicate themselves. This stubborn species was ruining everything, and something had to be done about those pesky humans who continued to kill each other in the most bizarre ways, and yet stubbornly refused to annihilate themselves. It was most inconvenient. They had gone so far as to use unoccupied craft to kill each other on their battlefields, while the person operating might as well have been playing a video game from their home entertainment center. It was appalling, to say the least, and a constant source of frustration, but we had to stay our hand, doing nothing, lest someone else stumble across their world as we had, and, God forbid, do the right thing. Then, one of the communications officers had a delightful idea. What if? We prepared a message containing the precise schematics of every conventional weapon they had created up to this point, ready to be transmitted to every nation in the local language, but we needed to test the idea first. We picked one specific airframe, an F-19 stealth fighter from the nation that had first employed their atomic weapons against an enemy, and released it to a toy manufacturing company. We were hesitant to see the results, theorizing that if everyone knew about their conventional weapons, the governments would have no choice but to resort to their nuclear weapons, and the long wait for their own annihilation would be over. It worked. The offspring of that nation scrambled to get the newest plastic models and toys of the most advanced airframe their country had ever developed, and the country itself denied its existence. We had even witnessed the airframe being tested over their unoccupied areas, and yet the revelation that it existed was denied. They even built a different aircraft, completely undoing their own identification pattern to cover up for the security breach, but some asked if it worked too well. We didn't care. Data collected screamed that a conspiracy to cover up the mistake would take years to undo, and 80 years later, we released everything to everyone. That was a mistake. Governments were paralyzed as their citizens read the schematics in detail, and we began to celebrate the destruction of their species. Then we noticed something we had not anticipated. Instead of rudimentary transport vehicles, heavily augmented by their owners showing up at Walmart parking lots, there were Abrams, Leopold, and T-14 tanks, equipped with nitrous oxide, hydraulic lift kits, and undercarriage lighting systems. Su-57s were parked next to F-23s at local airports around their planet, like it was common to own these weapons. Scorpion IFVs became weekend projects for father and son to enjoy at tank ranges across their world. Then the humans asked, what if? It began with a single human passing a beam of coherent energy through a matrix of isolated atoms, and developing a particle cannon that would sweep their world who was hungry for the new weapon, only to fire it at concrete targets. Then people went back looking for old ideas to become new again, developing beam energy weapons and magnetic mass drivers. Their nuclear arsenals forgotten and their governments impotent to end the madness, we realized what we had done, and called for a fleet to be dispatched immediately. These humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And they advanced further and faster than predicted. Before the fleet could be amassed to rid the galaxy of this threat, they had developed intersystem drives and began to visit the planets in their system. Before the fleet was halfway to their system, they had surpassed our own technology. When the fleet had finally arrived, they were exposed to an advertisement on the side of their most powerful warship, boldly declaring the best barbecue to be found at a place in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Our fleet didn't stand a chance at the first annual Pluto deathmatch, and the humans watched our defeats live on pay-per-view. It was humiliating. That is where this story comes in, Commander. I have sent this message back in time, knowing how much I enjoy the short stories of how amazing the humans think they are. They are quite correct. If my calculations are right, you shall read this story and realize that I am attempting to warn you, myself, from across the decades that have already come and gone for me. Our wife's name is Grislata. That should be enough proof for you. Listen carefully. If you value your career and species, do not send that message. Do not release their technology to their civilians, and absolutely do not ask the humans, what if?